everyone, and welcome to YMCA of San Francisco's Classrooms for All. My name is Alex, and today I will be your cooking instructor and showing you a really simple and healthy activity or cooking activity that you can do at home that requires no oven and no stove, just materials that you might have at home and some materials that you might need to find at certain grocery stores. Today we are going to learn how to make veggie and fruit spring rolls right at home. So these are very simple, very delicious, and a big hit for some of my kids that I've done this with before in one of our classes in cooking, and we hope that you'll enjoy it today. So if you would like, you can go ahead and take off your mask if you're wearing one today, if you're in a safe space. Right now I am in a classroom by myself, so I can go ahead and take my mask off. And I'll invite you to do the same if you are in a place that you can take your mask off. If not, you can go ahead and keep cooking with that mask on. It's no problem at all. All right, the first thing that we want to make sure we have is clean hands. So anytime we are cooking in a kitchen or cooking at our table or in a classroom like I'm in right now, we want to make sure that our hands are nice and clean before we handle any food that's going into our mouths or anyone else's mouths. So I went ahead and washed my hands, so making sure we're washing for at least 20 seconds with soap and water. Really warm water is the best. And then if you have sanitizer, you can go ahead and use that as well. The materials that you'll need for today are up to you, actually. So the main ingredient that we'll definitely need to make these, and you might not need to do it with these if you have another ingredient that I'll mention after this, but you'll want some rice paper. So this is dry rice paper, and they come in little circles of different shapes and sizes, but mostly like this, and they feel like a sheet of paper. They're flexible, but they can break really easily, so you don't want to move them or bend them too much. And then when they touch water, they turn into this really, really malleable and flexible, sticky material that you might have seen in some of the veggie rolls that you've had before. So you'll want rice paper. If you don't have rice paper, you can make this with lettuce and just wrap your vegetables in the lettuce today. So any kind of lettuce or leafy vegetable that's big enough to hold something and kind of act like a tortilla or a wrap, that will work just fine. All right, and then you'll want some vegetables. So this is up to you. Any raw vegetable that you can eat at home, you can put into this spring roll. So today I just bought 3 different materials that are different ingredients that I like to put into my spring roll. So one is a cucumber, and a classic one that goes into many veggie spring rolls is mung beans. I believe, yeah, mung bean sprouts. So they look like this. They don't have too much of a flavor, but they kind of give a nice little crunch into our spring roll. And then you'll want either carrots or any kind of vegetable. You can use tomatoes in there, you can put some avocado in there, you can do bell peppers, whatever your favorite vegetables are, you can go ahead and cut those up and get them prepared with me today. The next thing that we're going to need if you're gonna make fruit ones with me, which was a big hit with the kids didn't really like all the vegetable ones that we made in our program, but they did love the fruit ones that we made. So you can grab any kind of fruit that you have in your kitchen. So I got a medley of berries. So there's strawberries, raspberries, blueberries, and blackberries in this one. So you can get any kind of berry that you have. I also bought an orange that we can go ahead and cut up and place into our spring roll today too. So we're gonna make 2 different types of spring rolls, all out of vegetables or fruits that you can find at the store near you. I bought the rice paper at a local grocery store in the Richmond district where I normally work at the Richmond YMCA, but you can find them in a lot of places, especially in Safeway or any grocery store that you shop at. Usually they're in the Asian food section where you can find a lot of really awesome materials. All right, the other things that you'll need aside from the food are a big bowl with water in it. It could be warm or cold. So you'll want a big bowl of water, clean water, because we're gonna dip our rice paper in there. You'll want a clean cutting board, a knife. Please make sure that you're using a safe knife for you, or if you have permission from your parents or family members to use the knife at home, or you have the help of a family member to help you cut any of the fruits and vegetables you're using today. Then you'll want some plates. I'm using paper plates today. You can use either or. And then you'll want some saran wrap so that way our rice paper doesn't stick to whatever surface it goes onto. So saran wrap or plastic wrap is great. You can also use a silicone mat that you might put on your cookie sheets when you use in the oven that you can reuse over and over again. So something that won't be too sticky for our rice paper to stick to. So definitely saran wrap is perfect for this too. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. You can go ahead and gather the materials that you have at home. Whatever vegetables and fruits you love to eat, you can put right into your spring roll today with me. And feel free to follow along step by step with me, or just watch and do this on your own time later on. All right, so let's get started. The first thing that we want to do is we want to prep our fruits and vegetables for our spring rolls. So I don't know if you've ever had a spring roll before, but usually they're served at Vietnamese restaurants. And I love the ones with the shrimp inside of them. And I think I crave those with the peanut sauce too. So if you don't have a peanut allergy, they're always served with a peanut dipping sauce or sometimes some soy sauce on the side. Today, we're going to make a different variation of the Vietnamese spring roll. So I'm going to take my vegetables first and start to prep those. So making sure they're also clean before you start cooking with them. So I'm going to take my cucumber. Definitely not going to be using this whole cucumber because that would just be a huge cucumber medley here, and we don't need too much cucumber to make our spring rolls. So I'm just going to cut this cucumber in half. And I'm going to set aside that other half to use maybe later in a salad or maybe for my fruit spring rolls after. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is cut our cucumber. If you're using cucumber today, this is how I like to cut my cucumber for when I put them in spring rolls. So being very careful, I'm using a really big chef's knife right now, but because I'm an adult, I've learned how to use these safely and securely, and I have permission from myself. But if you have permission at home, please feel free to use a safe knife for you. And what we'll do is cut long ways down our cucumber. So what I'm going to do is place the cucumber up or flat straight in front of me so it looks kind of like it's pointing away from me or towards me. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold my cucumber down and cut it in half long ways, making sure my fingers are out of the way of my knife and we're being really safe. So you should have 2 halves of a cucumber, or a half of a cucumber cut in half again to make 2 pieces of cucumber. So we're not going to stick this whole thing into our spring roll. We're going to need to cut this down even more. So what I'm going to do is place those flat down so where the flesh you can see is going to be facing down on my cutting board. And I'm going to cut those again in half long ways. So that way we'll have 4 long pieces of cucumber. So you should have multiple halves of cucumber here. And then we're going to keep cutting those one more time in half. So each half will now be cut in another half. So what is 2 times 4? Because that's the many halves we're going to have in our, how many cuts we're going to put into our cucumbers here. So if you know the answer, we're going to find out once we count out all of our cucumber halves here. So we're going to cut in half carefully the next pieces of cucumber. And they don't have to be perfectly even. Some of mine are a little skinnier than the others, and that's okay. Just as long as we have a few halves to cut from. Being very careful with my fingers out of the way. And you should have 2 times 4. What was the answer? It should be 8 pieces of cucumber here, cut in halves. And then we're gonna cut those in half. So now we're gonna find out what 8 times 2 is. So we're gonna turn them to be horizontal, so kind of laying this way across. All of them in a stack is fine. And we're gonna go ahead and cut those in half. So we're gonna do 8 times 2. Does anyone know the answer to that one? We can count them out at home if you would like. So if you're cutting along with me, you can quickly cut. But the answer to 8 times 2 is 16. So we should have 16 pieces of cucumber. Now we might not use all of this cucumber today, and that's gonna be totally fine. But now we have these smaller cuts of cucumber. And you could even cut these down even smaller when you start to make your spring roll. So if you like less cucumber, you can cut them down a little bit less or to a little skinnier than this, so you can have more room for the other vegetables you're adding. So what I'm gonna do next is I'm gonna put these off to the side so I can prep my other vegetables today. So I'm gonna grab a plate. And these ones are sticking together, so it's kind of tricky. Grab one plate, eventually. There we go. And I'm gonna place my cucumber right onto that plate. I'm gonna place that right off to the side so we can use that for later. The next thing I'm gonna prep, so the mung beans, they don't need to be prepped at all, so you can just have those off to the side and ready for your next step. But I bought these little baby carrots, and I know that we normally you can buy carrots shredded, so if you can find shredded carrots at the grocery store or at the market that you shop at, then you can go ahead and grab those and you don't have to do this next step. But I really like carrots in my veggie spring rolls, so I'm gonna go ahead and cut these little baby carrots into smaller pieces. So instead of cutting long ways, since they're really small, I don't wanna hurt myself when I'm cutting them. So what I'm going to do is just cut them horizontally. So we're going across this way, so we're laying the carrot, and we're just gonna cut down into smaller pieces. So I'm laying a few carrots down. So they're gonna be still circular in shape when we cut them. And when I cut, I like to curve my finger in, or my fingers in, so that way the tips of my fingers are safe and my knuckles are kind of guiding the knife away from my fingers. So we can cut all the way down until we're satisfied with how many carrot slices we can cut. So, all right, so they're already stuck to the knife right now, so I made all these little tiny cuts of carrots. And I'm gonna repeat that over a few more times with the next carrots that I have right here. Remembering to tuck my fingers in so that I avoid hurting myself. Keeping the knife pointed away from me the whole time. I'm gonna keep doing this a few more times so I have a good amount of carrots. All right, that should be enough for one spring roll today. So you should have little circles of carrots if you're cutting little baby carrots like I am. I just cut them down along horizontally across so that I can make little slices, and they end up being little circular shapes of carrots and really skinny, so we can eat them and not have too much of a carrot in a bite. So I'm gonna go ahead and put those onto the plate with the cucumber. Go ahead and slide that off. So that's all the vegetables that I have prepped for the veggie spring roll. But before I assemble my first spring roll, I want to prep my fruits too. So we can do this all in one go. So I'm going to make a plate of our fruits, and I'm going to make a plate of our vegetables, so that way we can make them all at the same time. So the next thing I'm going to do is using that same cutting board, since the vegetables won't interfere too much with the flavor of our fruit. So I'm going to take some of the fruits. And you could always just lay them into your spring roll whole like this, since we usually eat our berries whole. But I like to cut them down and make them a little bit smaller so we can get more fruit in each bite. So I'm going to take a few of each berry and cut them in half, whichever way you want. So you can go long ways or short ways. I'm going to go ahead and cut some blackberry. You can even cut them into fourths if you want even smaller bites. Making sure to always keep your fingers out of the way of your knife. And then you can cut as many as you want to fill. If you're making multiple spring rolls, I suggest cutting a bunch of berries to make sure you have enough for whoever you're making them for today. So for this one, I have blueberries and raspberries, and I think at the bottom of this bowl, I have some strawberries, so I can go ahead and cut those down too to make sure they all fit. You're going to want plenty of each, so making sure we're getting a good amount of each fruit that you want to taste in your spring roll. Here's some strawberries already halved, but I'm gonna go ahead and halve them again, so that way they are about the same size as the other berries. And I know normally we've never really seen a spring roll made with fruits, but I promise you it's going to taste delicious, especially if you use any of the additional sweeteners at the end to dip into, or even if you want to eat it by itself, it's going to taste delicious. So trust me, on the fruit one, I know it might look weird in the beginning, but it will taste amazing. So I'm gonna create another plate for my fruit. So I'm gonna unstick another set of plates here, see if I can do it quickly. There we go. It's kind of a fun sound. All right, so once I've cut a good amount of berries that I want in my spring roll, I'm gonna go ahead and slide those off of the plate, or of the cutting board, and put them right on my plate for later. The last thing to do is to cut our orange. So you can do this multiple ways. You can go ahead and cut into it as is, or you can go ahead and peel it first and then cut into it. I'm gonna cut into it first and then cut out the good part that we normally eat, because we're not gonna eat the skin of our orange, are we? I think it's possible, but it won't taste as good. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut into my orange really carefully, making sure my fingers are still out of the way. Ooh, and this is a fun looking one. It's really colorful on the inside, almost like a grapefruit. And I always love the smell of citrus, so it's gonna smell so yummy. So don't forget to always smell or taste your food as you go. There's no shame in eating a little bit along the way either. So I'm gonna cut them into slices like I would if I was gonna go ahead and eat them off of the rind here. And you might not use the whole orange. You can go ahead and save the rest for breakfast tomorrow, or for another snack later on, or to eat off to the side. The next thing I'm gonna do, you can also just go in and go ahead and peel off, whoop, let it fly a little bit. You can peel off the rind or the skin of the orange so that it exposes just the fleshy part that we're gonna wanna add into our spring roll. And then after I peel that part off, I'm gonna cut these into smaller pieces. So I have not too much room on this cutting board, but we're gonna make it work. I'm gonna put the skin off to the side so I can dispose of that in the compost later. And I'm gonna go ahead and cut these into fourths, or maybe even smaller pieces, so I can create little slices of orange like this, and then add that to the mixture of berries, because it's all gonna go into one roll. So go ahead and repeat that. You can peel the skin off, or you could cut the skin off too, whatever's easier for you. And then cut the pieces down a little bit more. So I'm gonna take an easier one this time that's not gonna fly off. Might be really sticky today, that's okay. That's what happens when you cook, when you make delicious food. Sometimes you'll get your hands a little messy, but that's the beauty of cooking. It's always a little bit fun. All right, I'm gonna do this one more time because I don't wanna have too much orange in there, and I'm gonna save the rest for my breakfast later, tomorrow, or for a snack for later. Now comes the fun and kind of magical part about making spring rolls. We are going to turn these into kind of a different structure or feeling or texture to them. So we're gonna turn these little rice paper sheets into kind of something gooey and elasticy. But before we do that, we're gonna grab our saran wrap and one more plate. And what you'll do is you'll pull a sheet of saran wrap out. Oop. Maybe not the whole roll, but we're gonna do that this way. And you'll want it to be wide enough to cover your plate. So I think that's about it. And I just like to rip it off of the sheet there. It's all the same. So I'm gonna lay this saran wrap or plastic wrap right over the plate that I'm using right now. And you could wrap it down too, or like fold it underneath your plate to keep it steady. whatever you think is easiest for you today. All right. I'm gonna put that saran wrap over to the side. We're gonna use that one more time when we're making our fruit. So go ahead. I always like to clean up a little bit as I go. I don't know about you in the kitchen, but it always drives me crazy when I have a crazy mess around something that I really am making or focusing on. So to remove the distractions, we're gonna throw these away, and then we're going to prep our spring roll sheets to get started. So take one sheet of your rice paper, and they'll look like this. This one has a really cool pattern on it too, like little cross cuts or little squares inside of the shape. And what you'll do is you'll take that bowl of water and lay that sheet right into the bowl of water. And you could even press it in a little bit to get it all covered in water, like so. And you'll notice that it's starting to look more and more see-through, but you'll want to keep it submerged until you can really feel that it's turning really gooey and more flexible as you move it. So right now, I would say about a minute. You can take a minute to just leave it in there, maybe even less time. Sometimes it takes a little less, but you'll want to pull it out before it gets too gooey and it starts to rip. So you could let it sit, or you can just play with it a little bit, press it into the water, move it around. And then once you're done soaking your rice paper, you're going to place it right on top of that saran wrap plate that you have right there. So mine's feeling pretty flexible, and it'll just keep getting gooier as I go, even if it's not in the water. It's already been hydrated. So I'm gonna lay that flat onto my plate on top of the saran wrap. And you can't even see it, but it's still, I promise you, it's right there. And the first thing I'm gonna make is a veggie one, so I'm gonna gather my veggies that I prepped, and then we're going to layer them however you want to layer them on your sheet. So I'm gonna take some of the cucumber pieces, and I'm gonna lay them across, making sure I can feel where the rice paper is. And you can start on one side if you want. You can layer them all across. It might get harder the more you put into there. So I'm gonna layer a few of the veggies onto one side and try it this way. So you can put multiple cucumbers in there. And grab the mung bean sprouts and lay those on top as well. So what I've done is I've gathered all my veggies onto one side, so that way I can roll them up together. You can lay them all across too, and they'll still roll up, it might be a little challenging. So I always like to make it easier for myself and lay all my veggies on one side. All right, so I have my bean sprouts, my carrots, and my cucumber all on one side. And I'm gonna try to lift off the rice paper from the saran wrap. And I'm gonna start to lay the edges over my vegetables. So I peeled it off from one end and I laid it over the top. So I have a little tiny blanket over part of my vegetables. And I'm gonna lift up the sides and fold those over as well. If you've ever made a burrito at home, this is similar in folding the sides in first and then rolling it all up. So take your time with this. It might get a little frustrating. The rice paper might break a few times, but I promise you'll get the hang of it after a few tries with the roll. And I might even make a mistake today, and I'll show you how we can fix it too if you want. So what I did was I folded the top layer over, the top edge of the rice paper, and then I folded the other sides over so it can kind of roll all together now. So what I'm gonna do is pick up the veggies with the rice paper underneath and roll it across away from me with those sides still folded in as much as I can. And I'm gonna roll it until I have it all together in one roll. And mine ripped a little bit, so that's gonna be okay. Just might be harder to hold up and show you at the end. But at the end, it should all roll together and you'll have a nice veggie spring roll, like that. So mine has a little rip in it. You can always rehydrate another rice paper sheet and then roll that around it so that it has double reinforcement. Or you could leave it as is and let it fall apart as you eat it. But right now mine's staying pretty intact, and it should look just like kind of an egg roll or those Vietnamese spring rolls that you would get at restaurants. This one is all veggie, and what you can do, you can just eat it as is. If you love the taste of vegetables by themselves, you can always dip it into soy sauce and make your own little dip, or create your own peanut sauce that you want to dip into later too, just like you would at a restaurant. And that is your veggie spring roll. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put that right off to the side, and now we're going to make our next one. And this saran wrap is still good, so I'm gonna reuse that one from the veggie one. So we're gonna take another rice paper and place it into our water bowl to rehydrate it and get it nice and gooey so we can roll it and it sticks together. So we want it to make sure it's at that texture that it can stick to itself and stay intact. So I'm gonna rehydrate again, place it into the bowl of water until I start to feel it kind of slimy and it can move a lot easier. Remember, you can always take it out earlier when you still feel like it's a little tough. It'll still rehydrate as it's sitting out on the plate. So I'm gonna give it a couple more seconds, spin it around, make sure it's all covered. All right, that's about enough for this one. Cool. Let the water drip off of it, and then you can lay it right on your saran wrap over your plate. And now it's invisible, but you can still feel where the rice paper is. So now I'm gonna make my fruit one, and this one's fun. You can always lay it in a pattern if you want to, or with any amount of fruit that you want. So if you don't like a certain fruit or vegetable, you can always leave those out. So that's what I love about this dish, is you can make it however you want to. Great, so I've added a good amount of fruit to one side of my sheet of paper, or my sheet of rice paper. And I'm gonna do that same process over again like I did with the veggies. So this one might be a little harder because the fruit is cut into smaller pieces than, say, the cucumber that kind of kept the shape. So we might have a little hard time, but that's okay. If it rips, you can always make another one or rehydrate another rice paper. A beautiful fruit spring roll and a beautiful veggie spring roll to eat for snacks or for an appetizer or even for a little breakfast dish. Awesome, so today we learned how to make a really simple and healthy and nutritious snack that we can make right out of materials that we love to eat, like some fruits or veggies that are our favorites to put into something. And we're using maybe something we've never used before, like rice paper, and we learned how to rehydrate it with just plain water in a bowl and wrap it up into a beautiful and delicious dish. So for the fruit, you can always make a dip with honey or agave, or just eat it plain because there's so much nice sugar and sweetness naturally in this dish. Or with your veggies, you can eat that plain as well, or like I said before, use some soy sauce or create your own peanut dip, whatever you want to do at home. So thank you all so much for joining me in making some delicious fruit and veggie spring rolls. I hope you all enjoyed following along with me or watching this activity at home. If you would like to see more classes from us, you can go to ymcasf.org/classrooms-for-all, and we hope to see you all there soon. Thank you all so much, and bon appetit. Bye.
Did you know that YMCA of San Francisco never closed? When shelter in place happened, we could no longer provide in-person programming. We quickly shifted to provide youth and family programming virtually. As early as April, we started providing on-demand activities in our YMCA of San Francisco YouTube channel.
For this video, we're going to be making a geodesic dome.
Today, we're going to be making a hovercraft. The science around this activity is really awesome.
In addition, we have a regular schedule of activities for our youth and families to join live. We feature read-alouds, yoga, family Zumba, arts and crafts, drawing clubs, and more. So don't miss out on our virtual youth and family offerings. Visit www.ymcasf.org for more info and class schedules.